Perfect. Okay. Happy to help.
Yeah, right now.
All right. So, greetings, everyone who's joining us virtually and in person here in the room. We're so excited. My name is Juliana Yee. I use she, her pronouns. I direct the AACC, or have the pleasure of doing so, and also serve as an assistant dean for Yale College. And if you have never been in this space before, but many of you have, we are sitting in our multi-purpose room, and on the walls on both sides, on our left and right, are our anniversary historical timeline panels. So we actually turned 40 in 2021. Yes, the ACC has been around for 40 years.
Wow.
And so we've been here for actually longer than 40 years. But yes, the center was established in 1981 thanks to student organizing led by many members of the Asian American Student Alliance. And so feel free to sort of like soak in the history of this space. And really relish in the fact that we can have this kind of space, because I think especially in this day and age, we cannot take it for granted. I think there's a lot happening legally across the nation that actually puts these type of spaces and the work that we do in sort of a precarious situation. So never take it for granted. We will continue to push and fight to keep these spaces. So before I hand it over to Austin, who I will introduce shortly, to introduce our guest speaker of the day, I want to just take a moment to acknowledge the lands on which we are settled upon and which Yale University is settled upon. And also to acknowledge the fact that these are the ancestral homelands and traditional territories of indigenous peoples who have been here since time immemorial, and to recognize that we must continue to build our solidarity and kinship with Native peoples across the Americas and also across the globe, because indigeneity is a global identity. And so Yale University and the Asian American Cultural Center, located here in New Haven, Connecticut, acknowledges that indigenous peoples and nations, including the Mohegan, Meshintucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Schaghticoke, Golden Hill Pagasit, Niantic, and the Quinnipiac, and other Algonquin-speaking peoples, have stewarded through generations the lands and waterways of what is now the state of Connecticut. So as we listen to a workshop about Red Canary Song and the amazing work that Chong has done, I also invite you to sort of think about how all that is in relationship to the lands in which we occupy, and how we can continue to support Native peoples in all the different kinds of work that we do. And to also acknowledge that this concept of mutual aid really comes from Native and Indigenous practices, right? And so with that, I want to hand it over to the president of the Association of the Asian American Yale Alumni Association, Austin Beck, who is joining us via Zoom. Austin, take it away.
Thank you for the warm welcome and leading us in the land acknowledgement, Dean Yee. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Austin Beck. I am a Yale College graduate 2011, and I am the president of the Association of Asian American Yale Alumni, or AAAYA for short. That's how most of the alums refer to the organization. And it's a pleasure to be here with you today. And it's really wonderful to see the in-person and virtual attendees for today's event. AAYA really hopes that this is the first of many joint AACC and AAYA events this year that bring students and alumni together. The Yeh Community Service Fellowship that brought us today was established to honor the memory of Tina Eugenia Yeh, who perished with her father and aunt on October 31st, 2000 in a plane crash at Taipei's Chiang Kai-shek Airport. Tina was a graduate of Yale College and the School of Organization and Management, now known as the School of Management. Since its establishment, the Tina Yeh Fellowship honors her memory by awarding a fellowship grant of up to $5,000 for Yale students and recent graduates to financially support summer internships at a nonprofit organization that serves the Asian community in North America. The fellowship's goal is to nurture the leadership development of students and lend support to nonprofit organizations that provide critical services to poor and disenfranchised communities. As a note, the fellowship is now accepting applications for this coming summer, and the application link and more information, including past organizations fellows have served, can be found on our website at AAAYA.org. A little more background, the Fellowship Award Committee is led by members of AAYA's National Board, and each year carefully reviews a wide range of applications. The committee concerns the proposed host organization, the scope of work, and expected impact, among other factors in making our award decision. Last year, the committee was particularly compelled by the work proposed by today's speaker, Chong Gu. Chong, a graduate student in the School of Architecture, spent the summer in service with Red Canary Song, a grassroots collective of Asian and migrant sex workers and allies. Chong's work this summer building advocacy programs and performing outreach to Asian massage workers in New York comes at a time when the Asian American and migrant community, and especially women, have experienced increased hate and violence. Indeed, following the horrific and tragic violence against Asian American women in Atlanta, the Fellowship Committee felt priority and urgency in supporting work we felt actively surfaces and serves the needs of this community. I'd like to extend my sincere thanks to Chong for the impactful work they accomplished this summer and agreeing to share their experience with us today. So thank you, Chong, and I'll hand it off to you.
Okay, thank you, Dean Yee, for hosting this event, and thank you for inviting me. Thank you, AAYA, for this fellowship, and thank you, Austin, for the introduction. It's a great honor to be here today at the Asian American Culture Center to share my work with Red Canary Song. But before we begin, I want to pay tribute to the lost lives at Monterey Park. I know there's a space for grief here tonight. Please come and share space with our community if you feel like you're having a difficult time. I titled this presentation Solidarity in Transience because both words are keywords to my work. Throughout history, the job of the architect is to build, usually something safe, solid, permanent. But today, so much of our life is based on something unknown, the unpredictable, and instability has become a constant for our generation, whether willingly or unwillingly. So in the meantime, our connections with people are becoming much more vulnerable than ever. So how can we architects design and build for the enduring solidarity in the time of instability is a question that I keep asking myself every day. Red Canary Song first came together in November 2017. We began our organizing the fight for justice and police accountability after the murder of Flushing massage worker Young Song, who was killed during the police raid at the time. We started as a project to provide legal support for her family and help her mother pay for healthcare expenses. I joined Red Canary Song first in April 2021, right after the Atlanta spa shooting as a part-time organizer. At the time, I was still living in Queens, and I would bike to Flushing to visit parlors and get to know the community parlor by parlor. Throughout the year, I slowly learned how to organize events. Here's a picture. Here in the picture is another volunteer, Zedong, who is actually a postdoc here, also at Yale, and how to practice mutual aid. Here's some mutual aid fundraising posts from our Instagram. I want to sort of elaborate a little bit more on mutual aid, just in case not everybody is on the same page. I mean, because there's no sort of a unanimous definition, nor is practiced the same way everywhere. But Dean Spade's book on this topic gives a pretty good definition where they categorized mutual aid in 3 aspects. One, mutual aid projects work to meet survival needs and build shared understanding about why people do not have what they need. For Red Canary Song, it is important for us to tell the stories because we believe stories are powerful tools to destigmatize our community. So we always share the stories on our fundraisers, and most of the time simply as they were told to us by our community members. Number two, mutual aid projects mobilize people, expand solidarity, and build movements. And for us, every mutual aid case we do, we would do we would do an independent fundraiser for each case. So not only each story can be told, but also everyone who donates can partake in every single helping case. And then three, mutual aid projects are participatory, solving problems through collective action rather than waiting for saviors. You might notice almost every single post has very different graphic standards. That is because whoever in our collective takes the case is usually responsible for summarizing and producing graphics together with a community member who's requesting the aid. So no one asking for money can just simply sit there and wait for the finance team to hand over cash, which resulted into this like very organized landscape on our Instagram account. And in March 2022, I had the opportunities to co-produce our vigil at Washington Square Park for the Atlanta SPART shooting. That was my first time working with the entire core collective directly on a very intense schedule. This event was funded by multiple grants, including the one from Center for Sexuality and Gender Studies from NYU. We got to collaborate with multiple sister organizations in the city, including Asian American Feminist Collective. It was a huge community success. Here are more photos. But at the same time, this is the time I was like, you know, how can I afford to get more involved in this work? Because unlike the majority of the core collective who are mostly professional dominatrix in the industry, I don't have the financial resources to not be dependent on a financial compensation while doing this work. So when I saw this fellowship, I decided to give it a shot because just because. And at the end of the day, Red Canary Song paid half of my compensation over the past summer, and this grant covered the other half, which is still not that much, but I was able to sort of somehow find a way to survive throughout the summer in New York. So for the work over the summer that I did with the Red Canary Song, I wanted to kind of work through in 5 perspectives: community programming, community leadership training, emergency response, art activism, and inter-org workshops. I'm gonna combine community programming and leadership training because at the time I joined Red Canary Song, we didn't have a leading Chinese outreach organizer for over a year. And then Lisa is this massage worker that I met from the get-go when I first started doing outreach, and then she and I soon became friends. Sometimes we would borrow her parlor as an outreach base camp because we share an office with Flushing Workers Center. And in 3 days of the week, we don't have the access to our office. So by the time I got the grant, I immediately started thinking about the sustainability of organizing work. How can we keep this going when I have to come back to school, right? So luckily around the same time, Lisa asked us if there are ways she could get involved more as well. So I proposed this idea to the core, and we got Lisa a 3-month outreach onboarding residency at the same time as my fellowship. And so we were so we kind of decided to kind of co-organize everything together in the past summer so she can get to know the core, but also slowly build trust and self-confidence that she could do this work, even though she cannot speak English. because she used to be very self-conscious about it. But then, in fact, a native Chinese speaker who know the dialects is exactly the best candidate to do this kind of work. So we did a lot of gifting events together. This is my trunk. On an average weekend, the universe told me to get a SUV so I can distribute mooncakes to massage workers when I was, when I was getting a car, I guess. I was also actively thinking about how to mobilize my education that I pay so much tuition for. Being in a creative community most of my time, I forgot that the majority of the population don't know how to use Photoshop. So I was making sure that we had adequate materials to publicize all the events that we're organizing. Here's an example of the monthly RCS general flyer. We have our brief history illustrated services that we provide listed and a calendar of all the programming for that month. On the right side of the brochure, and I hand illustrated the graphics and risographed these flyers in the art school. Looking back, there was actually a lot of work going into not only the graphics but also the language, how to rewrite the written materials about our history, our service, out of services that we already have, but in a fashion that's approachable to the workers. That itself was a challenge. For example, no workers would understand the concept of segregation, but relating to the art history interviews that we did, I tried to translate into something like down the line of like, hey, aren't you sick of your neighbors looking down at you, as kind of like more approachable form of language for the workers. We also organized ESL classes as well as bodywork technique workshops. This not only comes from the demand of such from the community, but also back to the issue with licensure, policing, and policymaking. So in September 2021, we, together with Assemblymember Gonzalez Rojas, who represents parts of Queens that we work within, submitted a bill to Albany decriminalizing unlicensed massage businesses. Because before that, when police raid parlors, often they said education law on the tickets. So we're saying that police cannot do that because these parlors are not licensed, not because they are doing sex work, but because the education in this industry leading towards licensure is not equally accessible to this particular community. Because A, it's expensive, and B, it's not offered in Chinese or Korean. So, however, in the meantime, the discipline of bodywork is very, very broad. Every culture, every practice, everybody practices it differently, and then there's no infrastructure or lexicon to sort of, let alone across languages, to even discuss the differences in organized format. And that blocks the vision. That's actually very critical because it blocks the vision of workers in this industry to see other avenues of improving their techniques and polishing their practice beyond providing sexual service. For example, in an upscale spa, let's say in upstate, a so-called Thai massage performed by a white masseur can charge for hundreds, right? So our hope in organizing these workshops is also to invite workers from different backgrounds to share techniques so they can broaden their understanding of bodywork and shaping a career out of it rather than just treating it as a shameful job for cash. We also host monthly excursions. For July, we were gonna do a Independence Day firework watching party, but got canceled last minute because of several community COVID cases. In August, we took the ladies to the beach at Reeves. And in September, I actually invited workers up to New Haven. We visited Yale and went apple picking at Lyman Orchards. Then emergency response, which is a sort of a more stressful part of the work, because you don't know when shit's gonna hit the fan, and then when they do, folks usually get super anxious, which is totally understandable. But for us organizers, it's difficult because they would keep calling you, asking whatever questions they have right on the spot. With each case, the first thing is try to tell them everything takes time to process in this country. And you don't have to rush every minute to get things resolved, because this is also where we need to draw the boundaries for ourselves, for our own insanity and our own schedule. But over the summer, these raid cases were particularly interesting to me because for the first time, we started to see police citing zoning regulations on the tickets. And as I mentioned earlier, they used to cite education laws before and also prostitution. But we stopped seeing prostitution tickets in the resurgence of police raids post-pandemic because we think because the Manhattan District Attorney decriminalized prostitution in April 2021. So now they take this detour of illegal occupancy through citing zoning resolution to get to the issue of licensure. From the police department's perspective, maybe they had the good intention to move the target away from the workers to the landlords. But if you cite zoning resolution, you have to build a ticket to the landlord but however, the reality is that the landlords leave the tickets to the tenants anyway because they simply won't get into any trouble or lose money. We also took a look at the lease contracts parlor owners would sign with their landlords, and what we realized was that often the landlords charge more than the usual deposit, security deposit, as well as having very harsh clauses in terms of eviction process in their lease. So they either have the tenants find their own way to get rid of the tickets by themselves, usually through paying a ridiculous amount to a lawyer who has connections to do so, or wait till the tenants evict themselves and take the deposit and pay for the fine on the ticket to get rid of them, which they'll still profit off just from the deposit. Right. So then moving to art activism, after the visual, I also continue to contribute to the art, the work that we do. One ongoing project is our art history archive. A few core organizers in the collective who are involved in the policy work we do are from the social science background. So it's important for to sort of keep collecting these stories to back up our policy work. Here's an interview we transcribed and edited that was featured in a Paprika issue that I edited last semester. But also, these stories themselves are such powerful art themselves as well. I constantly think about how to present them in different formats to sort of amplify their power. And here's some photos from our residency exhibition at Abrams Art Center that I produced sort of towards the end of last summer and it opened in October till December last year. And this is sort of a second iteration of the visual for Atlanta we did earlier. Here we set up a monitor under the massage bed in the gallery, so the audience can lie down, put on headphones, and look through the hole in the bed where you usually would place your head when you receive a massage to watch the English subtitles for the art history interview. We also are featured in a pop-up exhibition that just opened 2 weeks ago in Chinatown, curated by Diane Wan and Tommy Arai of AAAYA project, in an old souvenir shop now run as a community space by ISS, whose director is Beatrice Chan, who's also, I think, on the board of AAAYA, I believe. It was honored to share space with our sister collectives in the gallery space. So please stop by if you find yourself in Chinatown before the end of March. There's some good stuff there. It's at 127 Walker Street, off Canal. Okay, so here's some fun stuff. Over the summer, we also organized an inter-organization workshop in LA using a grant we got from New Breath Foundation. We flew folks from Butterfly in Toronto, M.Arch in Seattle, and ourselves into LA. And then we met folks from Swap LA as well as CCED. So Butterfly, M.Arch, and Swap, we all do sex workers outreach work. And then CCED is full name is Chinatown Community for Equitable Development. They're sort of more like an anti-displacement, anti-gentrification organizing group of organizers in Chinatown in LA. We had a lovely few days exchanging experiences and ideas around organizing, and also participated in a mini labor conference at United Teachers LA, and then kind of also expanding the conversation into unionization, which, yay, we just won the graduate student union here. And I also met folks from Sisters Son, which is a reproductive justice organization, at an album release party over the summer. Also, we were celebrated at International Horse Day, which is a legit holiday on June 2nd every year. But yeah, there folks threw a party at Nowadays, and I invited Lisa to Nowadays, and it's kind of crazy to see her getting like so excited about drag queens and everything for the first time in her life, I believe. I also want to just highlight all the food that we get to eat while doing this work. I always say it's like the best job. I'm basically getting paid to eat these food. For the last 5 minutes, I want to sort of take a dive back into my ongoing thesis, because everybody here is involved in academics, and I think it's important to discuss how we balance between organizing work and academic work. I personally struggle a lot oscillating between these two worlds, because it actually took up lots of my time and energy to make my case for either side. While acknowledging my position, and also appreciating myself coming from the perspective of being an architect, because it does provide me with these spatial tools to understand the issue in a slightly different way, and vice versa, being an organizer in this academic setting here. But claiming that autonomy in front of the other audience is not for granted. So in my thesis, I think, to me, what's the most urgent is to sort of think about how to unpack this body of materials in a way that makes sense to both worlds. In other words, I believe that figuring out how to tell the story through an inherently architectural narrative would be inspirational for the work of organizing, and vice versa, by telling the same story through an inherently abolitionist activist narrative. That itself would be serves as some inspiration for architecture. So extended from this body of organizing work, my thesis kind of exploring the duality of the curtain, kind of as a decoration, but also as infrastructure in the making of these massage parlor spaces, and study the practice of solidarity in a transient community of this community of Asian migrant massage workers. Because I see the curtains, though lacking physical strength, they're used to dress up storefronts of these parlors, at the same time disguising the spaces behind, and that cultivates a form of decentralized, anonymous, yet interdependent urbanity. Fusing art history practice that I mentioned earlier, and sort of investigative drawing practice that I usually do in my own practice, this research takes curtains at the entry point to study an amateur hodgepodge architectural form of transitory space as the predicament of various forms of marginalization. And trying to sort of produce a visual dossier of kind of like vulnerable forms. And then it also is somewhat a contemporary ethnographic research that exercises on the quality of weakness and hopefully seeking lessons on the DIY infrastructural and community facilitation of solidarity that might be possible in our future visions of transient space. Outcomes include a written narrative summarizing context, related theories. These are references. I don't know if you guys know Journey. And readings of space and some kind of models of situations that can help me process the spatial negotiation of safety and solidarity, and then slowly accumulate a collection of printed archive using these written, visual, tactile narratives, and a moment to reflect towards the final of the semester. Summarizing from the bibliography, I'm kind of coming from this position, being an abolitionist sort of point of view, I guess semi, because I do acknowledge the capitalist system that we all kind of still living. But I want to try to unfold how the fundamental flaws of the system can materialize into spatial forms of marginalization for this very specific group of individuals, and through which try to raise criticality of the current system towards a larger audience. And I sort of want to kind of break down this project into 4 sections throughout the semester, namely urbanity, domesticity, threshold, and solidarity. This isn't just me explaining my own syllabus for the semester. I'm just starting to unpack the work. But right now, just starting off the semester, I'm taking some time to sort of dive into the context from firstly the urban scale, where current is embodied as exposure and as protection. As architects, we tend to read space from plans, but that's a very it comes from our education and it's not so accessible to the rest of the world. So I'm hoping to sort of try to sink the audience into a psychogeographical experience of how massage workers who lack both language and technology access navigate through the neighborhood of Flushing. And also by unpacking the zoning tickets that I mentioned earlier, as well as the lease contracts and also the art history accounts of policing, I want to sort of try to visualize that the unusual density of massage parlors in Flushing is not a coincidence or a choice, but rather an involuntary clustering, which also itself is a form of solidarity due to the systematic marginalization of race, class, gender, and citizenship. These are all kind of buildings where you would find a massage parlor in Flushing, and they just all look different, have nothing similar. And then moving to domesticity, I want to look at Kern as embodiment of both nostalgia and as eroticism, which highlights the sort of the intersectionality of all these forms of marginalization, as Lisa Lowe, who teaches here, points out, as well as the spatial production of the racialized subjects, right? So these spaces also somehow manifests the internal hierarchies within the massage workers community, where people kind of want to disassociate themselves from each other, like massage worker want to disassociate from like sex workers, or like people who only do happy ending don't want to be associated with like people who do full services, etc. And then that itself like creates a lot of cleavages, makes the solidarity work so difficult because people don't want to be in the same space with each other, even within this very own community. But instead of showing the most precarious and the most vulnerable, I'm hoping to kind of through sort of object lesson sessions to pick up maybe healing and warm details of these DIY interiors to manifest that massage workers also have this understanding of their own work as communal consolation and as a good deed instead of a shameful job. And after midterm, in the threshold section, this is where I'm trying to, I guess, produce more like architectural theory-based work. And I hear understanding curtain as an address and as a habitat. I'm citing Eva Hayward, who's a trans scholar, and I want to argue that curtains define spaces of transience that we both transpass and inhabit. Curtains spatialize the in-between states of not only the exterior and the interior, the domestic and the commercial, but also the in-between identities of gender, race, class, and citizenship that are necessary if also precarious and unavoidably temporary, that we sort of all inhabit within. And the final section, solidarity, reads curtain as isolation as connectedness, where I hope to zoom back out to, again, kind of try to connect with a broader audience through the, I guess maybe some unpacking of the behind the scene work of the mutual aid practice that we do that I mentioned earlier. But also I want to quote Cohen, which is a very, very important concept to my work, that the process of movement building is rooted in our not in our shared history or identity, but in our shared marginal relationship to dominant power, which normalizes, legitimizes, and privileges. And finally, coming back to the old question of questioning the role of architects in the society today, but I think there is a relevance here to be made, going back to the very beginning of this talk, where, you know, like I question what does it mean to build for an unstable society today, given all the, you know, socially constructed and physically constructed circumstances that we sort of inhabit within. So that's a wrap. I'm on time. Perfectly 30 minutes.
Questions? Do you want to open it up for questions?
Yeah.
Folks here, and we invite anyone online if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, you're welcome to, or you can type it in the chat, and I'm happy to ask it on your behalf. So,
Or like regarding the
Yeah.
fellowship, like how how do you apply
questions
this,
about the
right?
fellowship, that too.
Yeah, I guess how do you nourish yourself, or how do you rest during community organizing? What do you think that looks like?
I would say within our collective, it's already pretty nice. It's very like moon energy instead of sun energy oriented in our own collective. We have this like ultimate mother figure woman that we always go back to if we like had to fight against each other within like small teams. So there's always sort of this last resort, like big mother figure out there, but also I would say your own friends. Just come back to your own safe space with whatever that means to you daily. Yeah. And I think it's always about small bits and like just like even 10 minutes of power nap or like complaining to whoever you can complain to. Also therapists. Yeah. Outsource it to the Yale pay. Yale's paying for it, so yeah.
In the slideshow, you briefly mentioned a gathering on the West Coast. Can you share with us some of the thoughts, like what they're dreaming of? or how we wasn't there like a conference between the
Yeah.
various groups that gathered?
Yeah.
And y'all talked about unionizing and techniques. I'm wondering, were there any takeaways that would be valuable to us right now?
It was actually insanely relevant conversation, precisely coming back from there, getting to the past semester where unionization efforts was happening, and and then I guess at the conference I was less. I was having a lot of epiphanies coming back and then say like talking to like the union leaders here, is particularly I guess on the questions of burnouts and how to like not take it personal when you feel like you're the only one that's holding everything up. But I think we really have to do advocacy and then just like make everybody feel comfortable to even just talk about these things. So, when you want to take a break, somebody else could just step in. And also make the process as straightforward and as easy as possible for everyone to be able to just step in anytime. I think is also the key. So like we tend to try to avoid technology like complications when it comes to outreach work. Try to make everything as plain as possible. Easiest language, like everything printed, like right in your face, so like everybody could engage, regardless of like how much they can mobilize in their own agency to access material and content. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you for that.
Any more questions? I mean, yeah, well, I don't know if I have like a question, but I've just been really interested, like as a architecture grad student, like I'm pursuing urban studies, so it's just like really interesting to see how you managed to like find a way to incorporate, this perspective that you bring as an architecture student and organizing work. Like, did you think about this like early on in like your grad student career life? I don't know. Like, were you thinking about this earlier on, or was this just something that you like came upon, I guess, when you first started a while back?
Yeah, I mean, the end of the day, I think everything happens for a reason. I started doing this organizing work precisely because I graduated from undergrad in 2020 and ended up not having a job for a little while, for a good while. And then that was not because I was not good. That was because of exactly the same systematic marginalization that are happening to this community that I was experiencing firsthand because of the pandemic, also firsthand for myself. So it felt like a coincidence at the time maybe, but now looking back, it really isn't. It's a manifestation of like, how we just share these same experiences from different ways in relation to the system. So I actually applied to grad school with a totally different body of material, but I was drafting that. I just started this body of work. So by the time I actually got here, I was pretty set that this is going to be the body of work that I want to do here instead of the stuff I applied with. And then luckily, and then for me coming from an undergrad degree that's professional, less liberal arts, what I was hoping to get here in grad school is sort of the liberal arts. So, I'm trying to take as many classes outside of architecture school right now as I can, like in gender studies and in ethnography and I don't know, in the other places, to kind of come back to look at architecture with fresh eyes and see like, I was actually never, for example, like a person invested in urban topics. I was more always about domesticity, but this project really reignited like how I understood urban problems from from particularly this perspective, and like, you know, like it's so important to also talk about this from policy and then talk from zoning. It has everything to do with what the city hall is thinking.
Well, if there are no formal questions left, we can end our sort of presentation portion, and there are some snacks behind. Sorry, virtual attendees, you can't join us. But feel free to, you know, treat yourself to something sweet and hang around and talk to Chong. If you have, you know, just other sort of conversational things that you want to bring up, I'm sure Chong will be happy to answer. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you, AAAYA.
Thank you, Austin.
Well, I was kind of wondering, I feel like a lot of the mutual aid efforts that you were talking about concentrated in kind of like the New York region. And I'm wondering, I guess, how you apply that knowledge to networks and relationships in New Haven.
It is very concentrated, but our practice does expand to Rhode Island and to West Massachusetts because we have people on the ground over there. It's, I would say, to cite ethnography theory, you have to be as specific as possible with the context. You cannot bring assumptions to like a new context with like knowledge from another place. I think you need to take time to like dive into whatever community that you're working with, to know what people are thinking, what people need, and then start from there.
Yes.
Yeah.